Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 87.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to bringing you useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques, bringing you the custom club fitting experience of your life and lower scores always. I love getting to speak with people who I haven't met before and who I have admired from some of the things they've posted in the past. I was absolutely blown away with the things I personally learned in this interview with Bruce Rearick from Burnt Edges Consulting about putter fitting and in particular, the putter fitting system he's developed. What captured my attention the most is his desire to fit golfers to putters that are a natural fit for how they putt, for how they stroke the ball. Totally, absolutely sensible. But he's had a lot of success with his system. So enjoy this terrific interview with Bruce Rearick from Burnt Edges Consulting.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast. You're going to really enjoy this one, folks. I'm speaking with Bruce Rearick, a PGA professional. He gave me a pretty long resume, actually. Current director of the Pete Dye Golf Trail, resort manager for Golf Resort. But most importantly for today, he has a consulting company, Burnt Edges Consulting. And I've seen a lot of stuff from him on Twitter, some really interesting things about putting. And he shared some things before we started. But I mean, he helps people like TaylorMade, Nike, Royal Melbourne Golf Club, Science in Motion, Byron Morgan Design. It's a putter designer. A lot of pretty high up people. And you're going to hear some things today I think that are going to be really interesting, particularly about putter fitting. But we'll jump into one or two other topics maybe at the end. So, Bruce, thank you very much for agreeing to do this today.
Well, Tony, thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, the first thing I always like to ask everybody is, kind of what is your story, particularly, the thing I'm most interested in, at least personally, is about fitting putters. And how did you really jump into that arena and really embrace it and get into it in a big way?
Well, Tony, from the start of my career, I've been a club geek, and I was an employee of Mr. Palmer, Arnold Palmer, for 20 years. I worked at Bay Hill and Latrobe, and when we were at Latrobe, we used to have practice sessions on Monday, and every practice session would end with him with about a dozen putters making strokes. And one of the things that you notice right away is that his stroke would change depending on the putter in his hand. And you could see it. And you'd ask him about it, and he says, "Yeah, I got to do this to make this thing work." And Mr. Palmer was a great believer and instilled in me that you can't really have a conversation about how your golf swing works unless you're going to talk about the tools that are in your hand when you use them, when you're going to swing them. And because most people don't realize that the club's got more say in what the ball does than they want to give it credit for. So club fitters understand that, but some instructors don't. So anyway, that started it. And then about 10 years ago, I was introduced to Science in Motion Putt Lab. I was part of the team that originally brought it to the United States or followed up on the original introduction in the United States. So I was the trainer and the fitter, and I wrote the club fitting protocol for the first draft of it, and was traveling around talking to everybody. And so I realized right away with Putt Lab that was a game changer when it came to fitting, because you could see, if you were looking for it, you could see the changes that got made by a change in the putter, the balance. And basically, I'm talking about the design. I'm not talking about color scheme or anything like that. I'm talking about, the design of the putter, shaft axis to face, offset, weight, all those things. So that's how I got started. And then after a while, as I started to collect strokes on my putt lab, and other guys would share things with me, and traveling more and more, I just became I just gave up everything else. I haven't taught full swing in 10 years, so it's all putt for me now.
Wow. You said something, I don't know why it didn't resonate before Latrobe, because I'm actually from Western PA.
Yeah, I saw that in your bio, McKeesport, St. Clair Country.
McKees Rocks.
I'm sorry.
But that's okay. I mean, in fact, many people mix that up if they know the area.
Yeah. You caddied at St. Clair, I heard.
I caddied at St. Clair, but the other thing that I did, hey, we're digressing, but there was a thing that was associated with this golf scholarship that I got called the Ham Golf Tournament, and Perry Como, you remember that name, right?
Sure, yeah.
Perry Como was part of that, and he would play every year, and one year I got to caddy in the foursome that Perry Como was in, and Arnold played in, and another guy, and they had a guy from Carnegie Country Club that caddied for Arnold, or else I would have, but they wanted somebody with local knowledge. But it was really fun to be close to him, boy.
So that was, I won't go back to a date, but Mr. Palmer was still playing pretty actively then, wasn't he?
Yeah, 67, 68, something like that.
You're right in the thick.
Yeah, but that was fun.
Yeah, I worked for him for 20 years.
Wow, what a great thing to have gotten to do.
And played over, I don't know, probably close to 400 rounds of golf with him at Latrobe.
Gee.
I made myself the permanent fill-in. So anytime their group was missing something, I got to play. It was really something. Really, you'll hear a lot about it. I can't talk about golf without talking about AP. So
yeah. Well, next thing I want to talk about a little bit is, and obviously that they won't be exactly fit for putters, but what are the biggest mistakes that golfers do when they walk in a store and they say, this feels good in terms of a putter?
Well, I think the best way to answer that is that most players assume what their stroke is like. They, primarily they think it's straighter than it really is. They won't accept that it arcs, that they won't accept that where they stand.
Hello?
Putter wants to move. And so what they'll do is they'll look to what I call the enhanced steer. If you have a body type and a posture and a distance from the ball that requires an arc, and you think that putter should go straight back and straight to, you're going to gravitate to the putter that feels best when you manipulate the stroke. The problem is that the manipulation in almost every case that I've ever dealt with is the source of the problem. I mean, you and I could sit here and I could go through a list of tour players right now that manipulated strokes that are struggling. And that's what people do. The other thing that happens is that the manufacturers know that you're gonna base your decision on visual appearance and how the ball feels off the face. So that's been the craze in the insert thing, because we can change how the ball feels. You assume that the ball feels different, that must be better, and I don't really deal with the things that help me get the ball in the hole.
Yeah, boy, one of my friends that's going to be listening to this is going to know that I'm saying, hey, I'm talking about you, because I know he's had some success with some people, but it's because a particular putter feels pretty good, off the face.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it just depends on what you're looking for, and nobody comes to me looking for something that feels better. Everybody's coming to me, I got to make half my greens in regulation to get out on a Monday, a Monday qualifier. But you can make it, if the goal is to make your customer happy and get him in a putter that he likes, then there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is if it does break down, and if you're not making as many putts as you think you should, then you got to look to why. Why do I miss? Not so much what do I do to make, but why do I miss? Why did I miss the 5-footer to lose the club championship? Why did I not make that 5-foot putt, 6-foot putt that would have put me in the playoff? Just those kind of things. That's the way we kind of approach it.
Yeah. Well, if you will, talk about, and I know you're going to get a little more into it. I mean, you spent a lot of time developing the system that you're now applying, but talk about some of the 3 or 4 most important, just fundamental principles related to the putter fitting system you developed.
Okay. The first was when we started this, if you would ask Arnold what the most important thing with putting or parameter that deals with putting. Bruce, you got to let me see the line. I got to be in a position where I can see the line. And you go through all the guys of basically our generation and before, they're going to tell you the same thing. I need to be able to see it. So if you go by the premise that the eyes will tell you where to stand, we want that to be the first thing we decide before we talk about anything else. Because what we do then is we take wherever you position yourself where you have, number one, where you can aim it correctly, but also your perception of target. I've heard it called spatial awareness. I've heard a lot of things. But what most people do is when they're set up over the ball and you show them a correct line, that line won't look like it's going in the correct direction. And so they'll start to try and adjust or fix or go where their eyes tell them to go as opposed to where the target really is. So what we found is that there was a reason some guys set up open and some guys set up closed and some guys like the ball forward and some guys like the ball back in their stance. It was because their eyes, visually, that was the most accurate place for the ball to be for them to putt. Why does Jack play the ball with an open stance with his head tilted with the ball under his right eye? That's where he sees it best. Why did Arnold play the ball almost inside his eye line, as close as he could possibly get it? That's where he saw it best. And over and over, Tiger, over and over, we found that these really great players did vision first. So that's the first part of what we do. And then what we do then is we build a theoretical model based on where you stand when you see it best. And most of the time, we'll do that first test without a putter, so that we get pure vision, you don't fit yourself to the putter that you got in your hand. The next thing that we want to know is, based on that, that's going to create a pattern of your stroke. That's going to define the arc, we call it. How big is the arc? Ping, when we sold the Putt Lab to Ping. When I sold it to Ping, we started talking about this a little bit in a training session. Few years later, they knew I was working on it. I knew they were working on it. You saw the iPing app talking about minimal arcs and moderate arcs and strong arcs and how different putters. You see it very clearly on Putt Lab if you're looking for it.
Oh yeah.
And so that's how that got developed. So then what we want to know is we know that every putter has a rotational what's the word I want to use? Has a rotational value. And every stroke has a rotational requirement, and we're trying to match those up. Now, the final thing that we want you to do is that we know that the best putters weren't proficient. They weren't the best strokes. The best numbers I ever saw.
The best looking strokes, right?
That's right.
Super. Yeah, right.
Yeah, the best numbers we ever saw on Putt Lab that I ever saw before I didn't work for the company anymore were Sergio Garcia, and Sergio couldn't make a putt to save his life, but he could zero out Putt Lab in a heartbeat. So what we look for is consistency. We know that the best putters had a motor pattern and a style of stroke and a look to their stroke that they matched with the motor pattern that they used. So typically you're a shoulder stroke with passive arms, or you're active arms and passive shoulders, or you're strong lead side or strong trail side. And once you decide that, we want you to use that every time, because we know consistency is a choice. The only reason that anybody that comes to see you for a putter fit is inconsistent is because they changed their stroke because they missed the last putt. So
yeah, right.
So when you do that, you get in this world where you can't fix anything because you don't know where to start. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to find the motor pattern that's easiest for you to produce. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at ball position, and we're going to look at how you set up to it and say, like, for example, I'm working with a player right now, pretty famous, that, and I throw that in there only so people pay attention.
Yeah,
so
yeah, right.
The ball is quite forward in his stance, but he likes to hit it with his right hand. Okay? So the problem with that is that I have to reach across my body to reach the ball with my right hand to hit it with my right hand. So we have to ask him to decide, do you feel stronger about hitting it with your right hand, or do you feel stronger about playing the ball forward in your stance? And then once we decide, he says, well, I got to play it forward because that's where I see it best. That's it. Now we got to find a source and sequence of motion that matches that ball position. And once that's all done, then through nothing but pure luck, I found out that there were different putter designs that match different strokes. And basically what it was, it came from an opportunity with Dave Pell's robot Perfy, and a method putter. The method one, when it first came out, it was a prototype. I was working with Nike, and we put that method one in the Perfy robot, and the robot vibrated across the room. Okay, so we knew the putter was out of balance to that path, right?
Yeah.
We knew that putter didn't balance to Dave's theory of an upright arc.
Yeah.
You know, I don't use straight back and straight through, but
upright arc. That's a nice way to say it. Right.
Yeah. And so, because an upright arc can be successful, sure. And there's a lot of people out there that want to talk about, well, straight back and straight through can't work because theoretically, it can work. It's all you can't parse words that closely. You gotta allow for some flexibility, and however the person perceives their stroke, they perceive it. But anyway, so we got a hold of a robot, and we started pumping. We started creating the situations that we had found and putting the putters in there, and we literally are able to now. I have an algorithm. It's a fancy term for how we do it, but I'm able to tell you exactly how much face balance or toe hang you should have in a putter depending on your posture, and that's been the one that's really been helpful to high level players, because we've made slight adjustments in the toe hang based on design to help their stroking, and all of a sudden they're not fighting the putter quite so much.
They're being more natural, which is one of the things I call.
Putter goes with you instead of you trying to make yourself work for the putter.
Yeah. Well,
and a typical example would be to have a really high MOI mallet and stand off the ball far enough that you really have created an arc and try and make that work. That's the obvious example. We see that one quite a bit because on the tour we see these, we call them high rotational postures with low rotational putters.
Yeah. Now, before we go on, I did mention I wanted to talk a little bit about eye dominance, but I guess the thing that I wonder the most as I think about it, do people ever pay enough attention to that when they're trying to set up, or are they just sort of intuitively finding the best way to see the line? Or, I know there's a lot of stuff that different people do with that, but I mean, are there just some simple things they could just do to just be a little more natural with that?
If you go with the concept that when you're lining things up, you use your dominant eye for the most part, and then you triangulate with the off eye for distance, okay?
Yeah.
So that works down the line and side on just like it works down the line. So when you're lining up the putter to the ball or to your perceived target line or the spot or whatever it is you use, you're going to do that with your dominant eye. So if I'm right eye dominant, there's a high probability tendency that putter is going to aim left.
I lost just a little bit there for a second. So if you're right eye dominant, you say there's going to...
Just for an example, if I'm right eye dominant and I like to play the ball forward in my stance because someone told me I'll roll the ball better that way, then there's a really high probability that your tendency will be to aim left.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? Same goes with left eye dominant. If I'm left eye dominant and I like to play the ball in the center of my stance, there's a high probability that I will aim the putter to the right. So is any of this etched in stone? Absolutely not. We don't even pretend to tell you there are absolutes. All we're suggesting is that this is an area to look at. So for example, if you have a left aimer and you can't find a way to get him to not aim left, then just have him move the ball under his right eye. And it doesn't really matter, not to go against Dave, because I think the fit for aim thing was brilliant, how they did that.
Right.
But there's problems with fit to aim, and that happens once you start moving. So if I have the ball in a funny position and I find a putter that I can aim that's a mallet and face balanced and I need the arc, my aim is just going to go, the term face change from Putt Lab.
Yeah.
Well, that face change is going to be huge. And so we're trying to minimize those numbers. So we want you to have the ball position. We want you to do what your eyes tell you to do. Where does it work best? And then we'll build a putter to fit whatever stroke shows up from that setup. So, and then you can really get into it. One of the things that we found is when you're reading a green and you're choosing the line, that most people are kind of lazy about doing it, and they don't get their dominant eye on the line.
Yeah.
They kind of just stand up there and they they're looking across the line. It's like having the sights on a rifle crooked. You think you're seeing something, but you're not. So we want you to be aware of what your dominant eye is, or aware of how you process the information, and make sure it's as accurate as it can be.
That's a great explanation. Well, let's jump into, you shared with me you see basically 9 different stroke profiles based on all the things you've been doing only over about 10 years, right?
Right.
So talk a little bit about sort of the philosophy behind that. You shared some of it.
Yeah.
But.
Well, what we did was when I got to a bunch of strokes, I tell people I have over 250,000. Nobody believes me. I tell them I'd send a spreadsheet, but
yeah,
you can't email it.
Yeah.
I started to see some patterns. I would, in the old PuttLab, now I don't know if your PuttLab, I still use the original PuttLab software. I know Christian's mad at me about it, but I'm sorry. I'm used to using it and I'm not moving.
Yeah.
So in the old one, you could run a spreadsheet with all the parameters spelled out in numbers. And I've continued to do that. And then I can start to group strokes and analyze strokes, and because I ask the questions. I ask what your eye dominance is. I mark down what putters there were. I was pretty specific about the details that I got when I made a measurement. And one of the things that we found is we started to find these, and they're basic, right? That there's basically 9 profiles. There's 3. If you group them all up and you get within about 1.5 standard deviation, you get this group of strokes that vary in arcs from basically a upright, which we would consider straight back and straight through, to a moderate arc, similar to like a guy like Justin Rose or Tiger Woods, to a very strong arc like a Aaron Baddeley or Ben Crenshaw, where they stand off the putter Lauren Roberts, stand off the putter quite a distance, use a longer than normal putter, and just let that thing swing, and it's a big arc. And then what we found is that at the same time that we were introduced to PuttLab, we were introduced to TrackMan. So the discussion about D-plane comes up all the time. Well, in my head, hey, this D-plane works for putting.
Of course.
And so because I can zero the path from any number of directions depending on the size of my arc. My vertical swing plane will determine where the flat spot is in that stroke, where I can square up the path to the arc. And so as we started to look at that, when I started to run in those numbers, then it popped just clear as a bell, these 9 profiles. And what's been fun is that the 9 profiles, I can give you a Hall of Fame golfer in each of the profiles. And so
yeah, right.
if that's the case, then where's optimal? And one of the problems that I had was that early on, and I think to Christian's credit and to PuttLab's credit, they've loosened up a little bit. But early on, we had an optimal stroke that we were shooting for. And they were asking me to go to Hank Haney's ranch and tell Hank that Tiger's stroke in 2007 wasn't optimal. I was not going to be that guy.
Yeah.
I said, this guy's winning everything. Maybe his stroke is optimal. And maybe we should be looking at that. Tiger has a rotation rate where the toe's moving faster than the heel at impact of almost 2.5 times more than what they think is optimal.
Yeah.
So you got to ask yourself, well, if that's the case, and I knew Arnold didn't fit, and I knew, going back to my days with Mr. Palmer, was all about Arnold and Jack. Well, I knew those 2 guys didn't fit for sure. Absolutely certain. And what I've come to find out is most don't. Most didn't fit the optimal. And I can give you some examples now of guys that are trying to be optimal that are really struggling with it. They're trying to have that low rotation, low arc, small arc, low rotation. Doesn't work for them. They're either too tall or they stand off the ball too far or whatever it is. So, and that's not saying that you can do it or you can't do it or you won't have success. None of that. I'm just saying that from a pure math and physics standpoint, you're fighting your stroke. And and that's what we're trying. I got off the point. I'm sorry a little bit, but
that's okay. No, that's good.
That's the thing is that so the 9 profiles help us narrow it down. So instead of you coming to us and saying, we got a world of putters to fit you in, and a world of we'll narrow it down to this is what we think works best for you mechanically. And the fun part for me is I never make a decision. All I ever do is ask questions. I never tell you where to go. I never tell you what's optimal. I never tell you what's preferred. I never tell you. If you get stuck, I've got some ways to offer some suggestions. But at the end of the day, this is your stroke. This is your stroke. It's unique to you. We've got some ways to help you. We're going to fit that putter to fit your stroke. And then we're going to let you build a stroke based on that because, and when they ask me why, I says, because that's how all the great strokes were built. Nobody ever told Jack how to putt. Nobody ever told Arnold how to putt. Nobody ever told Crenshaw how to putt. Nobody ever told Tiger how to putt. They turned them loose on the putting green with a golf ball and said, go learn how to do it. And what they did is they built strokes based on what they felt was best for them and gave them the best results. So I think that's the best way to learn. So if I've accomplished anything, I've shortened it down from a lifetime to maybe a couple months.
Yeah.
That you can build a stroke.
I wonder if Crenshaw ever putted with, a big mallet or if he did a lot of experimenting with, big offset and center.
No.
Probably not, right?
I've seen him a little bit. I know him a little bit from my Bay Hill days.
Yeah.
I was working for Putt Lab at Eisenhower Park on a senior tour event, and I had Putt Lab set up, and it was brand new, and the guys had heard the rumors about it, but they hadn't seen it in action yet. And Ben comes out, and he's going to hit some practice putts, and he sees me, and he waves at me, and I say, hey, Ben, how you doing? I said, come on over, I want to show you this. He said, no way, stay away from me. He didn't want to know. He knew what his stroke felt like. He didn't want to know. And I promise you that somebody, and I can tell you another story about Ben. Back in the day when Reed Lockhart signed Ben to a contract to represent their equipment, Reed Lockhart was a old school wooden clubs, and they were going back to old school. Well, they tried to build an 8802 replica for him. And John Hatfield, who was with Nike at the time, Hat probably went through 200 shafts before they finally found one that gave Ben the feel that he wanted. And so I doubt very seriously that he ever tried too much. Yeah. I saw Stan Utley one time try and use something other than his Answer or his Newport. Yeah. And it was, and he said, we asked him, he said, do you think you could be it was a Futura. And I said, hey, Stan, do you think you could be a good putter with this putter? He says, oh yeah, I can be a good putter with any putter. It's going to take me some time. Well, Stan hadn't been around Putt Lab long enough to know that I saw right away why he wasn't going to be.
Yeah.
Stan's got a pretty big rotation rate in his stroke, and when he put that Futura in his hand, it went shut to open real fast. And he's not going to be able to putt like that without releasing the toe. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's fabulous. Well, the other thing I wanted to ask, one of the other things is, you go into stores and you see a lot of putters, and almost all of them, I think, have some type of offset. Double bend shafts and, gooseneck type offsets. And, there's a lot of talk about face balance, small toe hang, large toe hang. How do you think those decisions are really made? Is it trying to be averages or,
by the manufacturers?
Yeah.
How they make them? But they're not. I can tell you from experience and conversation, I've talked to everybody and explained. I have never had anyone tell me that my system wasn't good.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense, Bruce, but we can't afford to build the putters for you.
Okay. So they've got to do something.
So what they do is now, so let's go back because you really hit a nerve with this question.
Well, and I'm not trying to beat up on them, but I'm just,
no, just something that happens because of what sells that just doesn't help you. Tony, you've used Putt Lab, right?
Oh yeah. I've had it for about 3 or 4 years.
Okay, so if I told you that a player with an offset putter will have a tendency to lean the shaft, have some forward shaft lean, would that make sense to you?
Don't think so.
No?
No.
You don't see the forward shaft lean and relate it to offset?
No.
Oh, you want to take a look.
Okay.
Okay? I think what you'll find is the tendency for them to lean it forward a little bit, especially when they make them. Okay.
Yeah, right. Okay.
All right. What you might see is I can't get it to the hole, and I'm adding loft and doing all that other stuff. But in the end, you'll see them leaning that thing forward a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just seeing it. But regardless, I think what's happened is that what the manufacturers know is that if I can convince you that the ball rolls better off my putter, I will sell one. Okay. So I put some insert stuff in there to tell you that it's going to make the ball turn over. But I also put some offset in there so that when you hit it and strike it, if you strike it with some forward lean, you'll get a perfect roll.
Yeah, and because most people are flipping it a little bit, right?
That's
or a
right.
lot of
So
people.
You loft it a little bit, you get it, and all of a sudden I get it rolling. So I'm standing in XYZ store, and I'm rolling it great, and all of a sudden I go, hey, this is it for me, and it's offset. But the problem is you get it out on the golf course, all of a sudden you start missing left.
Yeah.
So in order for the one thing that Mr. Palmer told me one time that has stuck with me forever is that very few people use the golf clubs the way they were designed to be used. And I said, there's a lot to that, boy. That, how to strike an iron and how to strike a putter and how the putter's built to be, how you strike it is totally, you don't do it. You use it, just kind of flail at it. And so if you look at a putter and you look at some offset, it really, two things that we found. We found that it has a tendency to close a little bit to the path. That if you look real close, that you'll see that an offset putter will swing slightly more close to the path than varying degrees of offset, depending on the player. So if I'm a perfect stroke, an offset might be 1 degree close to the path, where no offset might be 1 degree open to the path. Or if you're a guy like Justin Rose, full offset's going to be about 1.5 degrees close to the path, where moderate offset will be more square to the path, and no offset will be slightly open. So I think they build the offset in to help them prove the point of the ball rule. And my proof of that is recently Callaway did a video where they compared the old technology of the 2-ball putter with their new technology, face technology, with the 2-ball putter. And in that video, the putter with the enhanced face technology hits the ball at de-lofted probably 2 or 3 degrees more than the original putter that they used. So if the grooves or the dimples or whatever you're using is what's creating this forward ball roll, then why not just send it in there straight up and do it? Why did you enhance it by de-lofting it? So the thing that, going back to that, so that's, I think, why the offset. And I think they build really, if you talk to the old Nike guys, that'd be one, because they're all doing their own thing now. They would tell you that they never got to do what they wanted to do. They only got to do what the marketing people told them they could do. And I'm pretty sure for unemployed, unfortunately you have to talk to the unemployed, because the employed guys don't want to become unemployed.
Yeah.
That you would hear that from most people, that we know what we want to build, they won't let us. And so for a guy like me, I end up being a maverick, because I'm saying, hey, let's go straight with the public. Let's tell them what they need and what they don't need, and quit trying to fool them. And if that's too harsh, then we'll take it out. But I'd say leave it in there.
And then there's the big putters with the big, lots of lines and all this kind of stuff, and big fancy stuff, and
it's pretty picture, and it convinces you. I don't know how many guys I've seen that can't see lines anyway. They don't see lines well anyway, and they'll get one, and they think they're a bad aimer, and they'll just keep adding lines, and the more lines they add, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
Dave Moore saw that to be true. David and I talked quite a bit years ago. Early on, I shared a lot of this with David. And one of the things that David found real quick was, Bruce, that this no line thing. And then Adele backed off, and now he's about half of what he sells has no lines, which that makes sense to the data that we have.
Yeah.
You'll aim it better without a line than you will with.
Yeah, and then people are going to try to use a line on the ball anyhow, and that's another story for another time.
And that's just aiming the ball, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But you better make sure you don't want to be like Bernard Langer, where the line on the putter is dead left of the line on the ball. And and now that's one more level that I have to overcome. It's just really, really, Tony. It's a matter of how much can you handle. How many layers do you want to add to this thing before I can't handle it anymore?
But that really goes back to what you've done with your system too, because you're trying to not handle so much. You're trying to be more natural and
clean it up a little.
Yeah.
We found that women are more likely to stand off the ball and upright than men, so they should have higher rotation putters, more blades, less mallets.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, let's move to another little piece, and that is weighting, okay? And so obviously you've got some of the pieces about sort of the look, but talk a little bit about weighting. And one of the things that, I've done, and I don't even know where you stand on it, and that is counterweighting. I mean, I've seen a lot of guys that just get a much better feel with some kind of counterweighting in their putters.
Sure. I think that there's two. It depends. Are you using the counterweight as a substitute for a belly putter or attaching the putter to your body? And if that's the case, then it's a rotational thing.
Yeah.
And anything that helps, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's for sure. The problem, if there is a problem with counterweighting, is that if you use it to help a flip, the thing that you got to remember on the flip is that no one flips it on purpose. They flip it because they're trying to maintain speed, and basically their left side quits. Almost any stroke that you look at with a flipper, he'll turn his shoulders back, but he won't turn his shoulders through. He'll only turn them to impact. Left side stops, right hand takes over and flips the putter through to maintain the speed.
Yeah.
So if you do that, what you got to be careful is counterweight means just what it means. That if the putter is moving to the left, the counter wants to go to the right. And if you're not careful, and if you don't explain to the player that you want the weight to move with your hands, not away from the direction of the putter in your hands, you'll end up enhancing the flip and making it easier for him to flip as opposed to opposed to helping. Does that make sense? It's a hard one for me to explain.
I haven't ever seen anybody have an enhanced flip after I've done it, but I mean, for example, go ahead.
Well, what Christian would tell you is that it'll come over time.
Okay.
That if you have a mechanical flaw in your stroke and you use the putter to fix the mechanical flaw, over time the flaw will come back if you use weight as the cure. So if you've got a guy that yips it a little bit and you give him an ultra heavy putter to fix the yips will go away on the short term, but if they come back, they'll come back full force and maybe greater. Well,
that's something to definitely watch. So I appreciate that perspective.
So you want it on your counterweight, but all you got to do is tell them it's a how to use it. It goes back to not using the putter the way it was designed. All you got to do is tell them to keep the counterweight moving with your hands.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not this gets into it, but since we're talking about counterweight, let's talk about it a little bit.
Sure.
Typically what happens with a counterweighted putter is that the stroke moves to the shoulders. That a guy will counterweight the putter and he'll try and have a big muscle stroke. The problem is that because the counterweighted putter is typically longer than he normally uses, his shoulder plane becomes more upright or more horizontal. Does that make sense? That the shoulder plane is pointed on a
So he's definitely changing his whole character of his stroke.
So now everything's twisting, right? The heavy putter is swinging in one direction while my shoulders are moving in another direction, and I end up getting twisted and stuck. So what we will suggest with a counterweighted putter is to swing your arms independent of your shoulders. Stand Utley stroke, where the left arm back, right arm through, or left arm back, left arm through, or whatever that is. But let the arms swing on a vertical plane and just let your shoulders react to what your arms are doing as opposed to leading what your arms are doing. That allows you to swing that big heavy putter on a consistent plane, and you won't do some of the things that we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, actually, what I'm usually talking, when I'm talking usually counterweighting, it's not the big long ones with the weight in it, but just putting, you've seen these Optivibe weights that go down the shaft.
Yeah.
But okay.
Well, here's what we think, and then just to finish it up.
That's great. Yeah.
Give our opinion. No, it doesn't counter what you're saying at all. We want to fit swing weight to release point. Okay. So we know that a player will react to the swing weight when he allows the toe to cross the apex.
Yeah.
So by counterweighting, and then what we do is we fit overall weight for tempo. So think about it a minute. If I've got a guy that drags the putter, or I got a guy that's too quick, I can start making weight adjustments to square that thing up for him. And that's what you're doing, is that you're making weight adjustments and balance adjustments that says, this is what we think works better for you. And there's no reason for it not to work. And if it doesn't work, then you know that you got the weights wrong. You pull them out and you start over anyway, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you're not going to make a mistake, or you're not going to do anything wrong. That's the one thing I'm always trying to. Just because I've got an opinion and I'm telling you what I think and what we found, I don't think there's anything wrong if the player's willing to put some work in.
Yeah.
The only time that you'll do it is if you tell them this is the way you ought to do it, and if you can't do it, it's your fault.
Yeah, that really stinks. But the whole you said a big buzzword for me in the middle of that is the effect of weight on tempo and timing and stuff like that.
Right.
And that, I've just woken up to that recently.
Yeah.
That if you get these real heavy putters and stuff, how do you really create a flowing natural?
That's right.
Whoo, you got to be careful.
You can tell pretty quick if let's say I'm a slower than average. I have a slow tempo.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm using a putter that's too heavy, because that's the tendency is that slow guys like heavy and the fast guys like light. And so I want to bring it back more to the norm. How do I what's my tendency? Do I leave them short? Do I hit them long? Slow and heavy is going to be short.
Yeah.
Okay. And light and fast is going to be long. So you can dial it back in. So I'm always just asking the player, I'm saying, where's your miss? What's miss? Well, I'm leaving everything short. Okay, let's lighten this thing up a little bit. And we can do it. And then pushes and pulls we'll do swing weight. And short and long we'll do overall weight. But we put the weight in some funny spots. It's a little proprietary, but we think there's a magic spot to put it where it doesn't influence one thing, but it helps you on the other. So that'll come out.
That's neat. We'll hear about that sometime. So
pretty quick, probably.
Good.
The whole thing is what I'm trying to do is share as much as I can share and still hold on to some of the proprietary stuff, because the whole goal for me is to start my own putter company.
Sure.
Because I can't get anybody to jump in and say, hey, we like what you're doing, Bruce. We'll build them for you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to do it myself, and it's just going to be a small company. But if you want me to fit you in a putter, I can fit you about 9 ways from Sunday, and we can do a lot of things with shaft flex, with balance points, with whatever it is. What I can share with you is that we know there's two types of players. There's one type of player that likes to swing the putter head, and there's the other type of player that likes to swing the balance point of the putter, and thinks he's swinging the putter, and thinks he's swinging the putter head. Wow. And those guys that swing the balance point, those are the ones that you're helping by moving the weight.
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah. So whether you've got the data in front of you or not, you're still doing the same things we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's do one final small topic, and
Okay.
It was some of your recent, really interesting blog posts on linear and nonlinear, and I know you had a lot of fun doing that, but
yeah,
I wonder if even most people understand whether they are or not, right?
Well, I'll be the first to admit I'm not sure I do either.
Yeah. This is in terms of seeing the line and seeing the
right. How do you process the information? Yeah. And I guess the first time I heard it was, I'll give Mike some credit, Shannon. I know he uses it. But I can't remember where the first time I really it struck me. I just remember Mike. I remember Mike talking about it, being fascinated by it. Here's how I applied it. When I worked for Mr. Palmer, there was no doubt in my mind he's a linear player. His preference is a straight line, and he moves the straight line only if he had to and only as little as he could. So he looks at a putt from the ball to the hole, drawing a straight line to whatever target he has, and then moving that straight line based on how much he thinks it's going to break. So he's the proverbial cup out on the left guy.
Yeah.
Or a foot out on the right. But a straight line to that point, and then whatever happens on the way is what we hope happens, right? Then you take a guy, and then Mr. Palmer was very aggressive. He liked to bounce the ball off the back of the hole. So it's a straight line to the back of the hole, take the break out, let's go. And that was his way of putting for a long, long time. Jack, on the other hand, and so the guy I know next about is, because we talked about him all the time, is Mr. Nicholas. Jack reads the putt from the hole back, and he sees all of the break, and he sees it as a whole item. It's going to go here and here and here, and I'm following and I'm creating this trail, and it's going to fall in the hole right there. Jack was a perfect speed guy. He liked to get him to drop into the front. So I use those two guys as, are you Jack or are you Arnold? That's how I want to reference it. Now, I'm going to be the last guy to say that I think there's a definite. I think that you were born one way or anything. I think it's a preference. Like, for example, I think accountants and engineers like straight lines.
Yeah.
I think musicians and artists like curved lines. I think that, and so, but what happens is, let me just give you an example. This is a real life example. I'm a linear player. I like a line on the ball, and I've just learned that I do better if I just use a single line on the ball. And I point that line at a point left or right of the hole, the distance of the hole. I underread every putt because of that. Pels talked about it as well. Dave talked about it. Dave was a linear guy, and Dave talked about every putt's a straight putt and drawing that line and having the ball break off that line. And what he found as well, everybody underreads them in that process. Okay? The nonlinear guys have a tendency to overread putts. They'll look at it and see too much break, overthink it. They'll see too much break, and then if they don't have the perfect speed, they're missing high right or whatever it is they read. These are just tendencies that we've noticed. And so by trying to break it down, are you looking at this in a linear fashion or a nonlinear fashion? You can develop a strategy that goes with your stroke that works, that helps, instead of fighting yourself all the time. And one of the things that I'm looking at very closely is if you are an eyes over the ball player, you can get your eyes directly over the ball, you see the line perfectly, you aim great, you've got it, and you've got a linear stroke because of that, because of the upright plane, then would you be better off if you had a linear approach to reading the greens? And the opposite being true if you're a off the ball player. One thing that you'll find is guys that like to stand off the ball don't use very many lines. Stan Utley, no line on the ball, no line on the putter. Ben Crenshaw, no line on the ball, no line on the putter. Big arc guys don't handle lines well. So if that's the case, then maybe those guys do better if they have a nonlinear approach, a kind of a holistic approach. But the problem with all of it is that you have to choose a line to get started. And so how do you choose that line, and what works best for you? And, most guys choose a spot or aim to a spot out of their peripheral vision. And we know that if you turn your head, you don't see it as accurately as if you can just look straight forward. So we like our guys to try and aim at something that they can see without moving their head. And that way they
small. Yeah.
That's small. Right. Well, and close, because you don't lose your perspective. You lose the line when you turn your head.
Yeah.
Even though you turn it online and you do all the things that everybody has asked you to do to stay, it's not a perfect method. And you'll ask the player, you go, did this thing kick left? Where's it look now? Well, I'm left. No, you're not. You're perfect, but you think you are. And so that's the problem. That's the perceptual problem that most guys fight. And David and I discussed it. David has used a version of it for a long time. He sees it. I see it. Everybody that uses the system, the visual test, sees it right away that there's an accuracy problem looking side on. And regardless, and unless you get, you find that spot like Jack did or Arnold did or Trevino did or Crenshaw did or any of the guys, unless you find that spot, or you can be like Tiger and not care what's out there because you're going to hit it where the line's pointed on the ball anyway.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel for. And the last thing that I wanted to mention before I lose you is that why is Elvis so important? The most important thing, the thing that we found the most is that we're constantly being bombarded with guys that want to be in the zone. Okay? If your putter isn't balanced to your arc, you never can get in the zone because you have to fix it. When it swings shut, you got to fix it. So you can never get into however any of the guys want to describe it. I'm not going to get in their territory. I'm just going to say, hey, my job is to build the race car so that you guys can use it the way you want to. And if you don't have one that's balanced to your stroke, if you think that you can use a high MOI mallet on an arcing stroke, you got to know that you're going to be engaged in that putt from start to finish because it's going to twist on you, and you've got to fix the twist.
Yeah. So what do you think Jordan Spieth is? Do you have a
Yeah, he's a 4. I can tell looking at him, but I know a little bit about Jordan's stroke. And if you look at him, if you walk through it, you can tell. If you look at Jordan, when he sets up left hand low naturally, his shoulders are slightly closed to the target line. Most everybody's are, unless you make an adjustment, right? Like Jim Furyk makes an adjustment. He gets shut, then he turns open.
But do you think he's a sort of a linear, nonlinear realm?
Thinking wise, no, I wouldn't want to guess. I wouldn't want to guess.
Yeah.
He's got a little bit of an arcing stroke. It's kind of inside down the line.
Yeah.
I don't think he sees it well, because I think that's why he looks at the hole on the short ones. I think his eyes are out of position.
Yeah.
But he's built this stroke mechanically. He's built this stroke that repeats, and he has a feel. Everybody thinks Jordan's a great putter, or a lot of guys are great putters because they have this innate ability to start the ball on line. I don't believe that's true. I'm more of the belief that the great putters have an innate feel for how far they have to roll the ball.
Yeah.
And so a guy like Jordan, he might not start it on line all the time, but if it's 20 feet, he's going to hit it 20 feet. And the Germans felt that way too with Science in Motion. They wanted you to know how a certain distance felt rather than how a certain distance looked. And so we do a lot of drills with just asking you to hit a ball to no target a specific distance. And so you can develop a feel for 5 feet, for 50 feet, for 15 feet, whatever it is. So when you read the putt, you already know what your stroke feels like while you're reading the putt. You're not trying to adjust on the fly.
Well, and that you're also not getting nervous about, oh my God, am I going to get it close?
Well, I think that part, in fact, all of the stuff, the feedback that I get from all my clients is that the reduction in anxiety, because they're not trying to do something, they're just letting her fly. It's the Stockton. I don't care what you do, just don't try. and I think that's exactly, I think Dave's got it exactly right. Yeah. That if we can get you to, if it swings itself and you're moving and it's moving and everything's in sync, you don't have to worry about a lot of stuff. You got a way better feel for speed if everything's in balance and matched, and you're going to putt better because of that. And then if I can't start the ball on line, then you can deal with that a little bit, because that's certainly easier to fix than distance control.
Yeah. Well, that has been great today. So we're going to wrap it up. Boy, super information. But so you get the final word here a little bit about any sort of final things you want to pass on to people, and just maybe to have them think about, after they've finished listening. Well,
I think the biggest thing is that you're not born a bad putter. And if you seek out some help, number one is there's nobody teaching putting that can't help you. If they've spent the time and they've spent the effort and they're learning about it, and I specialize in putting, you can almost be assured that you're going to get some good information. Now, whether it applies exactly to you or not, you can overcome that. You guys, with a teacher player relationship, it can be overcome. Don't be afraid of it. It's not superstition. It's not rabbit's foot in the right pocket and a penny in my left shoe kind of stuff. And it goes to the highest level. I'm afraid, Ben Crenshaw, I'm afraid to talk to you about my stroke because I don't want to jinx myself. The best putter at the time in the world, and I don't want to mess it up. Well, the only way you mess it up is if somebody convinces you to change. And if you've got it figured out, then you should be the one telling everybody else how to do it. So don't be afraid of it. That's the biggest thing. And seek out the information and be sure, do not think that it's just you, because there's a lot of bad strokes out there that are putter driven.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of hope in that, right?
Sure. All hope.
I mean, it's a big amount of hope.
No such thing as a bad stroke. It's just misguided.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
That's going to be on it. That's going to be on a website somewhere.
Yeah. Probably right.
Well, Bruce, thanks for this today. It's great. I'm going to put a link in the Burnage's consulting blog stuff for people to look at, and we're looking forward to hearing more though about some of these other things you're talking about. So,
well, I think as we figure out how we're going to, because the biggest problem I have, Tony, and you can imagine, is that I'll fit a guy in a putter, then I can't sell him one because there's not one made.
Yeah.
And so I've got to be able to satisfy the customers, got to help my guys that are trying to use the system and say, hey, Bruce, where do I find this Profile 6 that you talk about? And if you look on our website, you'll see 9 practice putters, no loft, just blades, engineered exactly for our strokes. And what they do is, what they allow you to do is you can just take a dry erase marker, put it on the face of the putter. You know exactly where you're hitting it on the putter, and you know exactly how that will feel. And then you go searching for that feel when you go shopping. But we've had a lot of success, especially with some young players, of asking them to practice with these practice putters and get an impact point that's controllable without any variables, and then building their stroke from there. And we're really having some success. I guess that's why more people are hearing about us. So anyway.
Well, really good. Well, hang in a minute after we're done here, after I turn the recording off. But thanks again.
Thank you.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Bruce, a personal thanks. I know I am already a way improved putter fitter, custom putter fitter, from what I have already learned in this interview. And I hope you golfers and custom fitters who are also listening to this will see a terrific amount of value from it in terms of the things that Bruce talked about. I've included 2 links to Bruce's blog posts in the show notes. One is the most recent post that he posted in his blog post site, and the second is a much older post that captures some of the philosophy that Bruce shared with me in this interview, just to reinforce some of the things that he talked about. So enjoy these. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, well, I'm looking forward, you thought it was going to be the last time, to talking with my favorite semi-retired custom club fitting guru friend and recovered from dental surgery too, Tom Washon, about some of the interesting things he shared with me in the past month or so to help golfers, all golfers, shoot lower scores. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.